Hi guys, it's me Trisha, and today I'm going to be examining case studies involving discrimination, and I'm going to be discussing um, history involving Rosa Parks and current case studies involving the difficulties Starbucks has been facing. So, examining case studies are something that's super important to understanding the influence that past events actually have on society. And I think it showcases how important it is to continuing to study cases in the past because it'll help us not make the same mistakes in the future. So, when choosing which current historical case study to write on, I ran into a little bit of trouble. I wanted to make a difference with my case study. I didn't want to just examine something, write an essay on it, and get a grade. I actually want to do something I was passionate about that would make a difference. So, since the beginning of time, pretty much race has been a big topic for discussion, and equal rights has been something that has been fought for a very long time. But even today, when rights are so much different than they were even 30 years ago, we still run into discrimination. So, throughout this essay and throughout my speaking critical assignment, I am going to compare racism in today's society to racism in the 1950s. So, in December of 1955, Rosa Parks started a movement that would affect society to this day. So, in the beginning of this story, Rosa Parks, an African American woman, got on the bus after she had a long day at work. In the 1950s, there were different regulations for who could sit at the front of the bus, who could sit at the back of the bus, and there was actually something even called the colored section of the bus. And I just want to take a minute and just say how crazy that is of how much times have changed. Like, even saying that, it just feels wrong. Like, that's not something like having like that be a thing is something that's just insane. So, pretty much, Parks was sitting in the fifth row of the bus, and what happened was someone came up to her, the bus driver. His name was James Blake, and he told Rosa Parks and a couple of other people that they needed to move so that someone else could have their seat. And usually, what would happen was they would just get up and move to the back of the bus, but Rosa Parks did not do that this time. She refused to give up her seat, and it wasn't just the seat. It represented so much more. It represented her rights, and she didn't want to give up her rights. And the bus driver pretty much told Rosa Parks that she would be escorted off the bus and arrested. And that's what happened. She was arrested and she had to pay a $10 fine for her actions, and that's pretty much what happened. And it does seem like a small instance that happened, but it started a change that started a change for society, and it was such a big deal in our country. So in 1955, a minister by the name of Martin Luther King Jr., along with a community called the Montgomery Improvement Association, started protesting. These protests were nonviolent, which included boycotting all the Montgomery buses. So, pretty much what they wanted was they asked for every passenger to be treated equal. All they wanted was equality. They didn't want to be judged for the color of their skin, and they wanted to be treated like everyone else. And then they also requested that those who sit on the bus was a first come, first served basis, which in today that seems like the normal, but back then that was such a big thing that started a huge movement. And they also asked that African American drivers were able to go on the same bus routes as other drivers. So the protest began in December, and the Montgomery officials did their very best to sabotage what was going on. But in the end, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Montgomery Improvement Association, and they deemed that bus segregation was no longer appropriate to do. Um, so, pretty much the ethical issue in this situation is the unethical issue of racism and how society needed to change. And the case study I'll be comparing it to is the case that happened between Rashawn Nielsen and Dante Robinson. So they were two men that were in a Starbucks. They were simply just waiting for their meeting to start. They hadn't ordered anything before hand because they're there for a business meeting. And Nielsen approached the manager, and all he did was ask for the code to the bathroom. And the manager explained that the restrooms were paying customers only, which is not true. I personally have gone into Starbucks many times, asked to use the bathroom, and have not bought anything and walked out. And that has never been an issue. So Nielsen did the right thing. He just walked away. He didn't argue. He just went back to his seat. And soon after, the manager came over and pretty much asked if they were going to purchase anything. And the two men said, no, we're here for a business meeting. Like, we have waters. We're fine. Like, thank you, though. And pretty much the manager called the police and said that two men were in the Starbucks and they were refusing to leave and all this stuff. And the police soon arrived, and the men were shocked because to them, and probably to anyone around them, they hadn't done anything wrong. So the two men were arrested without their rights being read to them, and they were detained. And they were charged for trespassing and disturbing the peace. So the situation caused riots outside of the Starbucks location, and many people spoke up about what had happened. It actually made Starbucks re-examine their rules, and they held a racial bias training. So whether or not this is a racial issue, it's a human rights issue, and it's something that needed to be addressed and handled, and to make sure that it never happens again. So in this case, the men were affected, and the Starbucks company as a whole was affected. So the manager has spoken out, and they said they acted against their better judgment, and they should have handled the situation. They didn't think that the men would be arrested. They thought that the cops would just talk to them, but the manager has admitted that what they did in that situation was wrong. So in Samuel, First Samuel 16:7, it's written, "But the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." And I think that we should take this verse to heart, because in that situation, even though it can be considered a racial issue because the men were African American, people should be looking at the heart. They shouldn't discriminate against what others look like or anything. And I think that's a huge ethical within society that everyone, that our society struggles with on a daily basis. And I think that cases like this really show that we need to continue growing as a society and not fall back to the way we were 30, 20, 40 years ago. And even though the movement that Rosa Parks started and the movement that Nielsen and Robinson started are very significant, we need to continue to speak out, and we need to continue to be accepting. And we need to make sure that movements and other things involved inside the same realm give people a voice to speak and give people a voice to hear. Because when you analyze cases such as the Rosa Parks case and the Starbucks situation, you see the similarities, you see the racial bias, you see the people who don't listen, the people who overact, but they do have differences. Of course, the case that happened with Rosa Parks is significantly different from the case that happened at Starbucks, just because African Americans do have more rights than they did back in the 50s. But we must not forget what happened in the 50s so that we can make sure that it doesn't happen again. Thank you.